So last night I saw the VP debate. So I'm just going to give you my thoughts on it. I thought it was a little bit better than what we saw with the presidential debate, but it was still boring. But there were a couple of things that I've noticed. Number one, they didn't bring up the fact that Kamala was appointed as the DNC nominee, because there was never really any real primary. Number two, Biden pushed aside. So JD Vance versus Tim Walz. I mean, a lot could be said about it, but I got to tell you, Timmy Boy seemed to be struggling. Now, at the end of the day, who was the real winner? The answer was nobody, because the American people are being screwed over. Both candidates made it very clear that they are more than happy to, allow Israel to continue on with these wars, and pretty much it's more of the same. But there are some caveats, some interesting things that caught my attention. Now, before anybody says Tim Walz is friends with, School S, right? That was a gaffe on his part, okay? But his brain wasn't working when he said that. But there was something else about Tim that I noticed. Not like any politician, they like to lie. Now, I want to give a huge shout out to Hotspot, because we got some highlight videos about the stupidity of this debate and things that really caught me off guard. Most notably, when Tim Walz was giving a word salad for 2 minutes straight about asking why did he lie when he was in Hong Kong in 1989 during the Tiananmen Square crisis, before being asked to clarify again with an actual question. So he gave a word salad. He gave a word salad, and it didn't say anything. This is how you know these politicians are filled with hot air. Don't believe me? First of all, shout out to Hotspot, how they edited this video. This was good. I like this. This was funny to me. So let's play it.
Governor Walz, you said you were in Hong Kong during the deadly Tiananmen Square protests in the spring of 1989. But Minnesota Public Radio and other media outlets are reporting that you actually didn't travel to Asia until August of that year. Can you explain that discrepancy?
Yeah.
Yes, the discrepancy. Saying he was there, but he wasn't. Look, for all you don't know, at Tiananmen Square, it was a crackdown, right? And there's that infamous photo of a man standing in front of a tank. Was that Tim Walz? No, it wasn't. Was Tim Walz driving the tank? No. I know I saw some people making that joke, but he wasn't there. But here's the word salad. Fast forwarded.
Yeah, well, and to the folks out there who didn't get at the top of this, look, I grew up in small rural Nebraska, town of 400, town that you rode your bike with your buddies till the street lights come on, and I'm proud of that service. And when I was 17, I'm born, and I used to be a teacher, passionate, a young teacher. My first job, I got an opportunity in summer '89 to travel to China. 35 years ago, to be able to do that. I came back home and then started a program to take young people there. We take basketball teams, we take baseball teams, we take dancers, and we go back and forth to China. The issue with that was to try and learn. Now, look, my community knows who I am. They saw where I was at. Look, I was first, I have 4 hours in my community. I try to do the best I can, but I'm not perfect, and I'm not ahead of time. So I told them about that. Those same people elected me to Congress for 12 years. And in Congress, I was one of the most bipartisan people. We're nothing like farmers together, we're veterans benefits, and then the people in Minnesota were able to elect me governor twice. So look, my commitment has been from the beginning to make sure that I'm there for the people, to make sure that I get this right. I will say more than anything. Many times I will talk a lot, I will get caught up in rhetoric, but being there, the impact it made, the difference it made, I learned a lot about China. I would make the case that don't trust your common with us. I guarantee you wouldn't be praising Xi Jinping about COVID. I guarantee you wouldn't start trade war against losing. So this is about trying to understand the world. It's about trying to do the best you can for your community. And then for yourself, I'm going to understand what it is. My commitment is to teach you how to do that. I'll let it be soldiers, I'll let it be Congress. Those are the things that I care about.
Governor, just to follow up on that, the question was, can you explain the discrepancy?
All I said on this was I got there that summer and misspoke on this.
That's all you had to say. Not talk about riding your damn bike.
So I will just, that's what I've said. So I was in Hong Kong and China during the democracy protests, went in. And from that, I learned a lot of what needed to be in governance.
Oh, we have truly reached the bottom of the barrel. Now I know how the citizens of the Western Roman Empire felt as soon as they realized that, hey, this whole shindig's going to blow up. And we're all in on it. Now, I do want to pull this up here, too, because there was a point to where there was supposed to be no fact-checking, at least. And J.D. Vance, of course, responded back to the moderators, to which they did cut off his mic. Let's play it.
Thank you, Governor. And just to clarify for our viewers, Springfield, Ohio does have a large number of Haitian migrants who have legal status.
Sure.
temporary protected
Well,
status.
Margaret,
Nora?
but
Thank you.
Senator, we have so much to get to.
Margaret,
Thank you,
I think it's
Nora.
important
We're
because
going to turn out of the
debate-
economy. Thank
Margaret,
you.
the rules were that
The
you guys weren't
economy,
going to
we're-
fact check. And since you're fact checking me, I think it's important to say what's actually going on. So there's an application called the CBP One app, where you can go on as an illegal migrant, apply for asylum or apply for parole, and be granted legal status at the wave of a Kamala Harris open border wand. That is not a person coming in, applying for a green card and waiting for 10 years. That
Thank
is
you,
the
Senator.
facilitation of illegal immigration, Margaret, by
Thank
our
you,
own
Senator, for
leadership.
describing the legal
And
process.
Kamala-
We
and
have
Kamala
so much
Harris
to get
opened up
to,
that
Senator.
pathway.
Those
We have
laws
so
have been on
much-
the books since 1990.
Thank you, gentlemen.
The
We
CBP
wanna have-
One app has not been on the books since 1990. It's something that Kamala Harris created, Margaret.
Gentlemen, the audience can't hear you because your mics are cut. We have so much we want to get to.
And the moderators, by the way, were terrible. They couldn't control this. And what I mean by being the bottom of the barrel, it's because, listen, folks, the Democratic Party and Republican Party, they don't care about us. They're filled with people who are opportunistic parasites, okay? The DNC and RNC are one and the same. They're one and the same. There is no difference between a Democratic politician and a Republican politician, save for the fact that the Democrats want to put on this happy-go-lucky mask, saying that they care about people, when they don't. They don't, and never have and never will. But let's talk about the economy. Because, as I mentioned earlier on in the segment, Biden has been pushed aside. Now, who inherited all of his problems now? Who inherits now the legacy of the Biden administration for the past 3.5 years? Well, Kamala is VP. Now, here's the thing. The vice president can only do so much. But as myself and numerous other content creators within the independent media sphere have pointed out, Biden is was and still is on the mental decline. Who's running the show? Who takes responsibility for all the policy decisions being made by Joe Biden, or at least supposedly by Joe Biden? Well, it would have to fall onto the second in command. Now, we have seen other people step up, and let's be clear, there has been a divide between Biden's camp and Kamala's camp. And as I covered on yesterday's show, Biden is very angry, very upset that he's being pushed aside. But we have to talk about the economy, though. Let's pull up this video here. Shout out again.
We're in agreement that we bring those home. The issue is Donald Trump is talking about it. Kamala Harris has a record, 250,000 more manufacturing jobs just out of the IRA.
May I respond to that?
Yes.
So appreciate that. So if you notice, what Governor Walz just did is he said, first of all, Donald Trump has to listen to the experts. And then when he acknowledged that the experts screwed up, he said, well, Donald Trump didn't do nearly as good of a job as the statistics
No, that's a
show
gross
that
generalization.
he did. So what Tim Walz is doing, and I honestly, Tim, I think you got a tough job here, because you've got to play whack-a-mole. You've got to pretend that Donald Trump didn't deliver rising take-home pay, which of course he did. You've got to pretend that Donald Trump didn't deliver lower inflation, which of course he did. And then you simultaneously got to defend Kamala Harris's atrocious economic record, which has made gas, groceries, and housing unaffordable for American citizens. I was raised by a woman who would sometimes go into medical debt so that she could put food on the table in our household. I know what it's like to not be able to afford the things that you need to afford. We can do so much better. To all of you watching, we can get back to an America that's affordable again. We just got to get back to common sense economic principles.
I hope.
Now, in all reality, there was one portion of the debate that made me agree with JD Vance, and there was the talk of censorship. Now, for those who don't know, Hard Lens Media, we are the world-winning heavyweight champion in regards to being hit, terminated, demonetized, deplatformed. I mean, this isn't open for a debate. We are. We have been, always will be. And we could thank the 4 years under Joe Biden and Kamala Harris for our nightmare to be ongoing. I hate every single minute of it. And because when a channel is hit, it's very devastating. And a lot of our colleagues in independent media have been permanently demonetized or banned off of a lot of these social media platforms. Now, I stand against censorship. But for looking at this point, this is where JD Vance probably brought the game home to his side. Now, again, I'm not voting Democrat or Republican, and the office of vice presidency is nothing more than a bucket of crap. But when we talk about censorship, it does impact us. Now, I view both Trump and Kamala as contributors to this nightmare. And under Trump, you know, while people say, well, there wasn't as bad censorship, there was. And while he may not have been the one directing it, he sure as hell kicked down the door when one Julian Assange was dragged out of the Ecuadorian embassy. Now, I do hope that we don't see things intensify under Trump. I am very fearful of a Kamala presidency, and I think that under a Kamala administration, well, I don't know how long we'll be here, folks, but hey, we love you from the bottom of our hearts. But let's talk about censorship, because censorship is the real threat to our constitutional republic, not a democracy. We are not a democracy. We are a constitutional republic. And this is where I would say, all right, JD Vance, you got my nod of approval. Let's go and play it.
Let's talk about the state of democracy, the top issue for Americans after the economy and inflation. After the 2020 election, President Trump's campaign and others filed 62 lawsuits contesting the results. Judges, including those appointed by President Trump and other Republican presidents, looked at the evidence and said there was no widespread fraud. The governors of every state in the nation, Republicans and Democrats, certified the 2020 election results and sent a legal slate of electors to Congress for January 6th. Senator Vance.
God damn it, they always keep on bringing up January 6th, January 6th, January 6th. It is not Caesar crossing the Rubicon. It was just a dumb situation that was really stupid, okay? January 6th was nothing more than a nothing burger. Everyone get over yourselves. The Republic is still here.
Vance, you have said you would not have certified the last presidential election and would have asked the states to submit alternative electors. That has been called unconstitutional and illegal. Would you again seek to challenge this year's election results, even if every governor certifies the results? I'll give you 2 minutes.
Well, Nora, first of all, I think that we're focused on the future. We need to figure out how to solve the inflation crisis caused by Kamala Harris's policies, make housing affordable, make groceries affordable, and that's what we're focused on. But I want to answer your question because you did ask it. Look, what President Trump has said is that there were problems in 2020, and my own belief is that we should fight about those issues, debate those issues peacefully in the public square. And that's all I've said. And that's all that Donald Trump has said. Remember, he said that on January the 6th, the protesters ought to protest peacefully. And on January the 20th, what happened? Joe Biden became the president. Donald Trump left the White House. And now, of course, unfortunately, we have all of the negative policies that have come from the Harris-Biden administration. I believe that we actually do have a threat to democracy in this country, but unfortunately, it's not the threat to democracy that Kamala Harris and Tim Walz want to talk about. It is the threat of censorship. It's Americans casting aside lifelong friendships because of disagreements over politics. It's big technology companies silencing their fellow citizens. And it's Kamala Harris saying that rather than debate and persuade her fellow Americans, she'd like to censor people who engage in misinformation. I think that is a much bigger threat to democracy than anything that we've seen in this country in the last 4 years, in the last 40 years. Now, I'm really proud, especially given that I was raised by two lifelong blue-collar Democrats, to have the endorsement of Bobby Kennedy Jr. and Tulsi Gabbard, lifelong leaders in the Democratic coalition. And of course, they don't agree with me and Donald Trump on every issue. We don't have to agree on every issue, but we're united behind a basic American First Amendment principle that we ought to debate our differences. We ought to argue about them. We ought to try to persuade our fellow Americans. Kamala Harris is engaged in censorship at an industrial scale. She did it during COVID. She's done it over a number of other issues. And
mind you, again, they're not even bringing up Joe Biden. They're just saying Kamala, 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 Kamala.
We're united behind a basic American First Amendment principle that we ought to debate our differences. We ought to argue about them. We ought to try to persuade our fellow Americans. Kamala Harris is engaged in censorship at an industrial scale. She did it during COVID. She's done it over a number of other issues. And that, to me, is a much bigger threat to democracy than what Donald Trump said when he said that protesters should peacefully protest on January the 6th.
Governor.
So, yeah, censorship is an issue, and it is something that is one of the things I'm concerned about. Now, Trump and Kamala do not install confidence in me because, listen, again, the difference under the Trump administration, yes, there was censorship, and yes, did conservatives get hit hard? Absolutely, but so did progressives and libertarians and activists too. conservatives are probably front and center, you know, because we are still looking at the fact that how many of the social media giants were full on in with Trump derangement syndrome, most notably Twitter. But it was that stepping stone, especially also Trump opened that door for what happened to Julian Assange. It was the stepping stone, the door opening for the next 4 years after his administration, with Joe Biden and Kamala at the helm. But hey, history is being rewritten, so now apparently Kamala was captaining the whole ship at the time. And under those 4 years, I witnessed many good content creators get censored and demonetized. Hard Lens Media also got a gut check here and there. But I also saw how many social media platforms were changing their algorithm to dictate what people can and cannot see. But the thing is, you only could censor people for so long until they push back. And censorship is a very important issue to me. Now, the front and center issue is going to be the economy. But when you start going after the First Amendment, especially when many Americans are saying that the economy does suck, excuse me, of course the establishment's going to do everything they can to try and silence and suppress. I want to pull up this other video here as well.
Talk about
Apologies. Let me rewind.
It's a damning non-answer for you to not talk about censorship. Obviously, Donald Trump and I think that there were problems in 2020. We've talked about it. I'm happy to talk about it further. But you guys attack us for not believing in democracy. The most sacred right under the United States democracy is the First Amendment. You yourself have said there's no First Amendment right to misinformation. Kamala Harris wants to use the power of government and big tech to silence people from speaking their minds. That is a threat to democracy that will long outlive this present political moment. I would like Democrats and Republicans to both reject censorship. Let's persuade one another. Let's argue about ideas, and then let's come together afterwards.
You can't yell fire in a crowded theater.
No one's yelling fire, but I do like screaming out fire when I hear the fact of, hey, more rules and regulations coming onto the internet, more rules and regulations in regards to speech, more changing ways in which policy is being written. By the way, folks, again, you know, trying to ensure that your channel is still around. And look, I don't wish this on anybody, but it is a very frightening situation as a content creator when your channel is potentially at risk of being Thanos out of existence. It's a very real thing, and I do not wish that on anyone. It is a very frightening situation, and I've seen many conservatives and libertarians and progressives, independents, all be hit by it. But what I find fascinating and funny is just how Tim Walz was tumbling all over himself. It's as though he wasn't even ready for this, making himself look like a clown. Now, I don't want to say there was a 100% clear winner, but this censorship is, in my opinion, at least how J.D. Vance was breaking it down, in my books, I view that as a win. Could he have done a lot better? Oh, absolutely. But we have to talk about just how ill-prepared many, at least in regards to many of the talking points Tim Walz was saying. And yet I was bombarded with emails by the Democrats saying Tim Walz won, Tim Walz won. No, he didn't. He did not win. He wasn't ready for this. He was out of his element. He had that sad clown face on. Let's push on with his other video here.
Well, I want to thank Governor Walz, you folks at CBS, and of course the American people for tuning in this evening. And one of the issues we didn't talk about was energy. And I remember when I was being raised by my grandmother, when she didn't have enough money to turn on the heat some nights because Ohio gets pretty cold at night and because money was often very tight. And I believe, as a person who wants to be your next vice president, that we are a rich and prosperous enough country where every American, whether they're rich or poor, ought to be able to turn on their heat in the middle of a cold winter night. That's gotten more difficult thanks to Kamala Harris's energy policies. I believe that whether you're rich or poor, you ought to be able to afford a nice meal for your family. That's gotten harder because of Kamala Harris's policies. I believe that whether you're rich or poor, you ought to be able to afford to buy a house. You ought to be able to live in safe neighborhoods. You ought to not have your communities flooded with fentanyl. And that too has gotten harder with Kamala because of Kamala Harris's policies. Now, I've been in politics long enough to do what Kamala Harris does when she stands before the American people and says that on day one, she's going to work on all these challenges I just listed. She's been the vice president for 3.5 years. Day one was 1,400 days ago, and her policies have made these problems worse. Now, I believe that we have the most beautiful country in the world. I meet people on the campaign trail who can't afford food, but have the grace and generosity to ask me how I'm doing and to tell me they're praying for my family. What that has taught me is that we have the greatest country, the most beautiful country, the most incredible people anywhere in the world. But they're not going to be able to achieve their full dreams with the broken leadership that we have in Washington. They're not going to be able to live their American dream if we do the same thing that we've been doing for the last 3.5 years. We need change. We need a new direction. We need a president who has already done this once before and did it well. Please vote for Donald Trump. And whether you vote for me or vote for Tim Walz, I just want to say I'm so proud to be doing this, and I'm rooting for you. God bless you, and good night.
Oh, yes. How wonderful. God bless you all. So what's the takeaway from this? Well, for all those progressives who gave up their credibility saying Tim Walz was the guy, no, he wasn't. You know, having some fumbles here and there, stumbling all over himself, even corporate media in the aftermath of the debate. Well, they had to drop in their 2 cents because Kamala's service animal just didn't have what it took to really just say, to win. Now, look, I'm just going to pull this up here. I'm not going to read it out loud, but I think we all just remember what the hell this idiot just said. Live on air. Hope I don't say that again. So let's go ahead and pull up this video here. There was the aftermath. Tim Walz was talked to.
What do you think your strongest moment was tonight?
Oh, just I think it was a good debate. The public got to see a contrast, and I think the ending sums it up. The democracy issues important.
Governor, you said you become friends with school shooters during the debate. Can you clarify what you meant on that?
Oh God! Ah! I think what he meant to say was he became friends with the victims. Okay. That's what I think his brain was trying to do, but his mouth and brain weren't working together. He was still filled with all that hot air, especially talking about how he was not there at Tiananmen Square. Okay. That's what happened. But of course, corporate media had to weigh in.
There were so many niceties on that debate stage tonight. I am just kind of like, well, if you agree so much with J.D. Vance, why should they vote for you? I fully believe.
Well, they agreed on Israel. They agreed on funding war and continue on to make sure that nothing would fundamentally change. Of course, this is what goes back to my point. Hey, welcome to the party, BSDNC. They're all one and the same.
That Governor Walz went out there tonight and did what was practiced in debate prep. Did what the strategy was that the team put together. That was not the Governor Walz that I had seen out on the campaign trail. That's not the Governor Walz that I had seen during the Veep stakes, right? That was not the J.D. Vance that I know to be true. I mean, goodness, J.D. Vance was on that stage. He was sorry about Amber Thurman. He was sorry about he was sorry about a lot of stuff. We get things wrong, but do you agree with the policy? And then I just, that's not the Margaret and Nora that I know. Margaret don't do that on Sunday morning. So I just think that I know that there's so many people out there that want normal. They want normalcy. They just want, just be able to just disagree with, I just had a lot of things I agree with. This is not a normal election. J.D. Vance is actually not Paul Ryan. And Donald Trump sure as heck is not Mitt Romney. Okay. And what happened on that debate stage tonight was not enough contrast, was not clear enough for people sitting at home or frankly, who will probably consume this through the clips in their local news or here on MSNBC or on social media.
You think you're relevant. No, here's what I'm hoping people realize. Now, again, I do find, and I do have to give thumbs up to J.D. Vance, at least talking about censorship. It is an issue that's very close to me. It impacts me personally and should impact all of you as well because the censorship is all too real. But, my lovelies, my good people, what's the difference between these two? What's the difference between a Democratic politician and a Republican Party? You know you're going to get it screwed up the wazoo. It all depends on what's going to go up there. Something blue or red. Your choice, folks. Oh, wait, it's not your choice. It's the corporate donors. And yet MSNBC is now saying, well, that's not the Tim Walz I saw. That's not the J.D. Vance I saw. Well, what more did you want? Did you want J.D. Vance to throw a steel chair at Tim Walz? Do you want Tim Walz to, do the people's elbow? No. No, what you saw was a debate between two vice presidential candidates, which, by the way, again, the VP office, it's nothing more than the, secondhand seat. The only person who turned that office into something else was Dick Cheney, and J.D. Vance and Tim Walz are no Dick Cheney. But I do want to pull up another thing here, too, because Jen Psaki, remember her? Remember Jen Psaki? Used to be part of the Biden administration. Well, she had to quickly go to bat real quick for Kamala's service animal. Hold on. My apologies, folks. Let me pull this video up.
But coming out of it, I hope that they free Tim Walz and put him out there and let him be rusty at times and make mistakes and hug football players and cry and be funny sometimes. That's the magic. That's why he's on.
Set Tim Walz free, everybody. I want to see in the comment section and the live stream chat #free Tim Walz. He's a sad old service animal. He just wasn't ready. Free Tim Walz. Free Tim Walz. Everybody, #free Tim Walz. What do you want us to do again, Jen Psaki? Give us more platitudes. Give us more neoliberal platitudes.
But coming out of it, I hope that they free Tim Walz and put him out there and let him be rusty at times and make mistakes and hug football players and cry and be funny sometimes. That's the magic. That's why he's on the ticket. But coming out of it, I hope that they free
Tim Walz. That's all we got to do. So that's the highlights of the VP debate. I would say it was probably more engaging and, dare I say it, probably better than the Kamala versus Trump debate. But we just got a few more weeks now. A few more weeks until election night. Now, I know right now in some states there's early voting happening. And to you, my audience, you have to make a decision. Now, each of you can walk away with that debate that you saw not only was Trump versus Kamala, but J.D. Vance versus Tim Walz. And each of you have to come to your own conclusion about how you want to vote, be it voting Democrat, Republican, Green, or Libertarian, or not voting at all. It doesn't matter who sits in the White House. Each will have their own policies, while the rest of us still remain poor. I saw a lot of similarities between J.D. Vance and Tim Walz. I will say that maybe J.D. Vance was a little more prepared, and I think he came out on top over Tim Walz. I mean, that is something to be said, especially when corporate media was expecting a little bit more out of old Timmy. And Timmy just didn't have what it took, especially to fight back. Or either that, making some very big epic gaffes that would even have Joe Biden look at him and say, even I wouldn't say anything that stupid. And that's not saying much because Joe Biden's brain is now in liquid form. The debate. What was learned? I think J.D. Vance came more prepared for censorship, bringing awareness of just how crazy this administration has been. And while, yes, Biden was the president, Kamala was there as VP, and they pretty sure probably had the same briefings here and there, given the fact that there is still a divide between Biden and Kamala. But how we act going forward after this election is what's going to really matter. We cannot rely on these politicians to save us, because you know what I saw throughout that entire debate? Every other debate. A lot of promises, a lot of attacks here and there, and still nothing. I feel nothing for these debates. These are things in which we all have to come to terms with, because a politician won't save you. It's going to be us. So I will leave this question for you, the audience. And each of you, please, let's respect each other's opinions. Who won the debate? Tim Walz, J.D. Vance, or none of us? Type your thoughts in the comment section below.